Hello and welcome to Circle Time, the Early Years podcast. My name's Glenn Denny. I'm really pleased with being able to introduce our guest on this edition of the podcast. It's getting to that season where lots of nurseries are thinking about doing lots of projects within the garden, lots of gardening and things like that. But let's face it, do we always have the skills and knowledge that we need? Well, I'm very lucky that today on the podcast, we have the Skinny Jean Gardener, aka the Blue Peter Gardener, aka Lee Connelly. Welcome to Circle Time.
Hello, Glenn. It's lovely to be on here. I'm actually so excited to be on the podcast.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, it's so good to have you as well. It was like, when I was thinking of like, I wanted some fresh topics for this season of Circle Time. And I just thought, you know what? Gardening is one of those topics that every nursery I've ever worked at, every nursery I've ever been in contact with goes, oh, yeah, we'll be doing a little bit of gardening. And actually, none of the staff were like, let's be honest, if you can find somebody in the staff team that is the keenest gardener ever, they're the ones that don't want to do it because they've got enough to do in their own garden at home. And
I don't,
it's
I don't blame them as well, Glenn, because it's such a big pressure to be that one person that takes on the whole of the nursery's gardening duties. It's like, oh, you'll do it. Oh, you'll do it over there. They're like that is a lot of pressure on one person's
It
shoulders.
really is. It really is. I know one nursery I worked at, and we were really lucky. So we had a sort of woodland space, but we also had what we called the butterfly garden, which was kind of our gardening growing area. And for some reason, I got dumped in the middle of that. I was like, "Well, it's preschool, so you're head of preschool. Off you go. That's all your area." Huh? What? I don't know anything. I can barely grow anything from a packet of seeds. It's like it's quite a daunting prospect as well, isn't it?
I think it is daunting, but do you know what's beautiful about that as well is learning together, and that is one of the biggest things that I talk about like creating memories together is really important,
Hmm.
and also creating that relationship with a child that through gardening is is so incredible. Like I've experienced it throughout my career, and there is really some amazing points where you can be like, oh, we're both learning something here. We're both growing something. We're growing our knowledge, but also we're growing a plant, and that's what I love about gardening, especially in that setting. It's just like I always call my job like being a magician because you plant that little seed and then it turns into a magical plant that you can actually eat something from.
Hmm.
And I think that's in that setting, I think it's absolutely perfect.
Do you know, I never even thought about that. The way you described it there, it was you're growing together. Like, yes, you're physically growing a plant or a flower or vegetables or whatever it is, but also, yeah, you're growing in your knowledge with the child as well. That is a brilliant way of summing it up. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, because obviously your excitement as well sort of comes across because I've been doing this now for my 13th year of this and talking about that tomato seed that I grew for the very first time 12 years ago. That was a magical experience, but now I'm just sowing tomato seeds like here, there, everywhere. If you're learning along with the kids, then I think that's absolutely amazing. So yeah.
So, I mean, you're making me think back to yesterday within my setting, and one of the children had an apple for his snack, but we encourage the children to chop up their own apple. We've got child-safe knives, and he was chopping up his apple, and he was like, "Look, I've got a seed." So I immediately, instinctive, I don't know, whatever it was. I took the seed and I said, "Oh, why don't we? Let's put it on some wet paper towel and let's see if we can germinate it, and we can see if it'll start to grow." But that was an instinctive thing. I don't know because I mean, my running joke on this is I've been in early years for about 100 years. Um, but instinctively, I just went, let's do that. So we did that together and we got the water sprayer out and we made the thing down. And it was like, he was just interested to know. And obviously I said, well, we're not going to get it today. We won't get it tomorrow. This is going to take a long time. But it was that bit. It was like I was sharing some excitement with him as well. So yeah, it's interesting.
I think that's a really nice way of doing it as well, is especially through food. So one of my biggest, I have three different pillars of gardening with children, and it goes grow your own, wildlife, and fun. And grow your own is probably the number one way to get children gardening and getting their
Mhm.
hands messy. And not only that, you get that health side of it as well, because we know how hard sometimes it is to get children to eat healthy, right? And especially in these settings, this is the place where we're trying to educate children as much as we can that you need to eat healthy. And
Mhm.
so, especially in that apple situation, if we want to get children eating apples, showing them how it's grown and showing that this little seed inside this apple is going to turn into a tree eventually that we're going to get the apples from is an amazing way of doing that.
Mhm.
Um, and again, sticking to the apple seed is patience as well. One thing that we're not teaching enough of is that patient side of life. And gardening is never going to be fast. One thing that when I first started this whole career in children's gardening is people wanted stuff that was really quick to grow,
Yeah,
like radishes. And I mean, I still haven't met a child that likes radishes yet, but I'm still on the search.
I don't like
Yeah,
them either.
exactly right. They are really fast to grow, but no one cares about them. So, patience is that one thing that gardening can really teach because it does take time for things to grow, especially trees, but it does take time for plants to grow for you to actually be able to eat off of them. So I think that's such an important lesson that is built into gardening.
Definitely. I mean, I've been in in settings before where, like you say, it's that fast approach to it, and the amount of times I've done cress heads
Yeah.
is outrageous, and I'm like, but they are fast growing, and they can see a product, and you can talk about that. I suppose there is a link to, the apple seed there, which is slow to develop and everything else, and you've got to nurture it and care for it. But then you've got the crest, which shows the process, but in a faster way. Are those two quite a good thing to kind of link together, do you think?
I don't want to disagree with you. Do you know what? I think quest heads are fun, right? I just think that the actual process of slowly growing something has so many different parts to it, like the patience, but also like taking care of stuff. Things, if you want things to grow in life in the future, but
Hmm.
also within planting, you have to care for it and nurture it and take time with it. And I think, like anything in life, if anything's quick, it's very throwaway, and those lessons can be easily not not taught through it. So I do think, as much as I love Crested, I don't want to knock you too much, Glenn.
No,
If you
go ahead.
you go nuts. You go grow as many crescents as you want, right? But but I do think that slow part of gardening has so many different aspects and lessons built into it, which I really hold on to tight. Not when I first started, I was all about being like fast and like, come on, let's get kids growing. But I do now, these 12, 13 years later, I think that actually we need to hold on to that part of the slow part of gardening.
No, that's the thing. I do actually agree with you there. It's like, yeah, you get the fastness and that quick hit with the crest. But you're right about that. I mean, there is a movement within early years called slow pedagogy, which is all about slowing things down because we do live in a world that is after the next quick hit of something. And actually, are we just setting children up to kind of just rush at everything and not actually take anything in? Whereas slow pedagogy is about, as it says, it's about slowing things down. It's about taking time over things. And gardening really, it fits into that perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, the only thing we really teach them through growing crest heads is getting kids ready for TikTok, really. That's about it, isn't it?
No, it's way too early for TikTok. No. I just put my head in my hands, go, no, not TikTok. The amount of times you get one of the team coming in, I saw this great idea on TikTok. Oh, no.
Oh, I love that.
So,
Yeah.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say as well, it's the same with, like I say, my three different pillars I have is also wildlife, and exactly the same for
Mhm.
building wildlife areas in your garden. You can't expect wildlife to all of a sudden instantly be there just because you've built them a home. We've got hedgehog homes in our garden that
Mhm.
took about 2 to 3 years before hedgehogs even turned up.
Yeah.
So again, it's that patient side of it, which is so important to say, no, just because we've built a frog pond, a little tiny frog pond in the garden, doesn't mean instantly we're going to get frogs turn up. It's going to take time for them to really get to know the surroundings and actually feel like they can trust themselves in that space.
Yeah, I was going to say it's that trust as well. I mean, I know from my own like experience at home. I mean, we're just in the middle of actually having our garden completely redone because we've just moved into our current home. So everything's been done. But one of the areas that I am bringing into it for myself is I want to have areas for wildlife. So I need something for my bees and my butterflies. And I'm an absolute hedgehog nut. I absolutely adore hedgehogs. And last couple of houses I've been in, we've had hedgehogs coming into the garden, and I have my wildlife camera out and have my I have Hogsville, as I call it, my little hedgehog village, and they're coming into that. And the fact I've been able to lift the lid on one of them and see a hedgehog fast asleep in there during the day, and I'm like, yes, I want to share this with the children. And I think you can if you've got areas where you can do that. I think it's brilliant. I mean, we encourage the children to be digging, and it's that bit. It's like, well, what else can we do in that space?
Yeah, do you know what is also really important as well, Glenn, is by doing that at that really early stage of their life as well, is that they can take that home because a lot of parents don't do this at the weekends or in their home
Hmm.
setting. And so if children can be like almost the ones that bring that to them, like, oh, we did this today. Um, can we do some at home? That's really nice to be able to get that message out there as well, especially
Hmm.
around the environment and people caring about wildlife like hedgehogs. It's just not something for me. I'm like all over it. If I go and see my friends, they're not bothered about it, and I'm trying to like educate them and try and get them to do it. Do you know what I mean? Um, but I think for parents as well to be able to get that message is a nice way. It's a nice little route in there.
It absolutely is. Yeah, definitely. I think as well, it's almost like a reversal of the roles. Like the child becomes the teacher for the parents, right? So we're kind of showing what we can do within our nursery environment. I know lots of nurseries as well, like kind of not TikTok. I'm going to other social medias, but we do. I mean, my nursery does a weekly Facebook post of here's the things that we've done this week, and it's a great way of sharing that with parents. We also have a Facebook group, a hub for parents where we can share information with them, which is great. So it's that partnership as well. That it's not just, well, we just do gardening at nursery and that's it, and then you go home and we don't do any. It's that bit. Well, you could do this at home as well.
Yeah.
So it's opening it up for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, it goes straight back to what I said right at the start about creating memories, doesn't it? So if you're
Mhm.
creating memories back in nursery, then you can create them back at home with your parents. Then when these children are a lot older, in their teens, in their 20s, then you go, I remember when I first started getting my hands in the soil, and
Mhm.
then I actually took it back home, and when me and my parents spent amazing time with each other and my grown-ups, and I think that is an amazing thing as educators that we get to do. And I think the impact actually lasts for a very long time, probably further than we ever really think.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, going not necessarily gardening experience at nursery, but other experiences I've had in my time working in early years, that if you do something that really hooks a child in, it lasts through them. I mean, I'm still in contact with some of the children I looked after when I first started. I mean, they're in their 30s now.
Wow.
And there's still bits, it's like if I see them and I'm talking to them, it's like they still remember certain things that I did with them, and little activities that we did together, and they're still talking about that. So it does have a huge impact, and it's making it meaningful as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I keep going back to this whole three pillars thing that I keep working around, but
Mhm.
it also has to be the third one is fun. Because you've got the grow your own, you've got the wildlife, which are all very educational. But if there's not them fun aspects as well, there's nothing to really draw children out. So I also talk about making sure, especially in early year settings, that there's stuff for children outside that they can
Mhm.
enjoy doing, rather than maybe they don't want to constantly be sowing seeds or caring for plants or making wildlife areas. But there's
Yeah,
some fun bits out there that to draw them out, and so they can enjoy spending time with each other. I think that's so important.
it is. There's that kind of, we encourage children to make friends and to kind of be social as well. And I think there is that social bit, particularly for children that are just coming in to a nursery. If there's a nice calm activity that it, we could gardens in most nurseries can be very busy, very hectic, very noisy places when everyone's rushing around on the bikes or jumping off things or doing what children do within the garden space. But also, if you've got that quiet area, those children that are not necessarily ones for making all that noise and rushing around and jumping and climbing and doing all of that, there's a space for them then, isn't there?
Yeah, like a really small little den area for like either some sort of Wendy house or just a tented area that you can put up throughout the summer. That just like you say is a quiet area where you can just sit and take time. Is really important as well to bring that into it. So yeah, just making everyone feel comfortable in the garden is important.
Brilliant. So going back to something I said right at the start was we every nursery I've ever worked in or nurseries that I've kind of been talking to or people I know have worked in other settings, everybody does some sort of gardening. But how do we start it? Like what's the best way to begin to garden with the children? What do we need to start with? What's our kind of starting base?
I think, to be honest with you, I think grow your own is probably a really nice way. So look at what's being brought at lunchtime,
Hmm.
and connect it to that. So if there's a lot of tomatoes in what you're giving the children, then maybe tomatoes would be a great way to link what they're eating to that actual plant, and then throughout that year you'll be able to see that plant grow,
Hmm.
and that's a really nice connection. A connection there. I think that grow your own is probably the best way to really get started because I think it's a simple way. And I always say just don't do too much at once. If you're literally just starting, maybe with the first year, just grow 5 plants or just try growing 5 plants, or
Hmm.
maybe just get one packet of seeds and then go to the garden centre and buy a few plants that you've already grown and just care for them. So it's not so much pressure that you've got to get those seeds to germinate,
Yeah.
but you can still show how to care for plants because, even though a plant's already grown and you're just putting it in the ground, there's still a lot of care. There's still a lot of education that comes around
Hmm.
looking after that plant. So I think that's a really good way to get started. And then if we just tap into like wildlife, I think bird life is something that is really good that we can
Hmm.
start feeding into garden. Really simple for children to be able to see that as well, and quite nice, especially for that quiet time, to be able to see the bird life out the window come down from something that you may have made for them to come along. So I think keeping it simple to begin with is really essential
Hmm.
to get that success for both you as an educator and as also for the children, and then building up throughout the years of what space you've got.
I think that's right. It's yeah, you were saying like keeping it simple. I think that that has to be a key element because, like you say, some educators, some practitioners, they 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 fear failing the children or fear of failing just the whole project, if you like. And I think as well, actually, that word has just resonated with me there. Sometimes we do see it as a project rather than something that is consistent throughout the whole nursery year as well. Is that something that we maybe kind of trip ourselves at if we say, well, we're going to do a gardening project?
Yeah,
Because
because
that makes it seem short term, doesn't it?
yeah, it means that basically you're gonna plant something up in March, and then by May time you're just sort of gonna just disappear into nothing, and that's the end of it. I think that they're keeping that a continuous thing, little and often, every day doing a little bit of something
Hmm.
towards those plants, towards that area. It's just a nice continuous thing and theme that you can have within that setting. Do you know what I mean? Um, so yeah, calling it a project, like you say, I think that does mean that it can just end in a couple of months. Whereas gardening shouldn't be that. Being outside with all the benefits that we get from being outside,
Hmm.
should be continuous throughout the year, even though it is a little bit chilly. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I think that's the bit. I mean, we still take children outside in the garden to play, no matter what. I mean, it should be. You should be out no matter what the weather. There's nothing wrong with the weather. It's what you're wearing that counts. And it is that bit. I think, it's funny how in my own, talking to you there, and I came straight out with the word project rather than it's like, is that the way I see it as well? It's like, yeah, maybe. And I think that is limiting us.
Yeah, I know. I also think that's a little bit of sometimes that's a confidence thing. If you're not a gardener, or if you've not got that gardening knowledge, calling it a project means that if it fails in a couple of months, then we can just sort of forget about it and not worry about it. Whereas having it as a continuous thing, it means that you're going to continually grow your knowledge, and that means that just that little every little tiny step, it's like anything, isn't it? Every little tiny step you go up, your knowledge grows, but also throughout that whole year, your garden grows with it. It doesn't mean that I've been to so many places that have built and spent thousands on a garden and a allotment within that setting,
Hmm.
and then just haven't had the time to keep up with such a large space. And
Yeah.
it's just weeds and it's just a bit of a mess. And it does turn into a wild, it's called a wildlife garden after that, which is perfect. Um,
Yes.
whereas if you're starting small and maybe you've just got a little raised bed to start off with,
Hmm.
then that's nice and easy. You can get that success. It makes you feel good as an educator, but also makes the children feel good as well. And then the year after, you can just build up that area. I think that's the biggest thing we can do. One of the things that I work a lot in is in primary schools, and that's exactly what we do with them. Is we just give each class a small raised bed, and then they succeed at that, and then they look at maybe building an allotment, or they just need that success
Hmm.
to really feel like they've got that confidence to push on and do more. So I think if anything from this is starting small and taking your time is essential to the success of it.
Definitely. I mean, I know. So in one previous setting I was at, we had an allotment. So we were right next to our nursery was right next to the community allotment, and we actually had a double allotment. We were quite lucky we were able to have two. And it wasn't for me. I might have been the setting manager, but I'm like, I absolutely know nothing about this. And yeah, I'm quite honest about it. But I had two members of the team that were really on it. They knew what they were doing. And we did. I mean, the children were in there. I mean, two, three times a week, the children were over the fence and in with staff members and working away at it. And actually, the engagement was brilliant. And as soon as they got picked up, like by parents, it was they couldn't wait to tell them, "Oh, we were in the allotment today and we were doing this." And although it sounded like it was something special, but the excitement of, oh, we were doing the weeding and we were checking on the courgettes that we were growing and things like that. And there is that excitement, and I think that needs to be a catalyst for the adult to go, well, this is something that they're really into. I need to be into it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what that excitement comes from and goes straight back to what we were saying earlier, is that it doesn't happen back at the home setting. So that is something so unique to them children that they probably wouldn't really get involved with because we all live such busy lives, right? That sometimes the garden's the last thing that we even think about. If
Mhm.
we're lucky to have a garden, then that's the last thing that you can really think about. So at home, that doesn't happen as much. So in this early years setting, if we can bring that excitement, you're onto a winner, whatever, because they're doing something that they probably wouldn't ever usually do, and that's where that excitement comes from.
Brilliant. So I'm thinking for those that are sort of like maybe new to early years, but also new to gardening, do you think it's a really good idea to be honest with the children and say, well, I don't know lots about this at all. Why don't we learn together? Do you think that's a really good starting point then?
Yeah, I think so. Because also one thing you don't want to do is become just like the expert within this. One, because you could get in trouble if the parents come in and start asking you difficult gardening questions like how to prune my roses or something. But also, it's nice that everyone's on the same level, that we're all just slowly trying to work out how to plant that seed or how to do it. And at the end of the day, if it's not as complicated as perhaps sometimes it's made out in media because all you need to do is get a seed and put it in the soil. Doesn't matter about how deep it is to start with. If as long as it's in the soil, you're gonna get some growth from it.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we overthink and we look at these packets of seeds and look at all the writing on the back, but actually just put them in the soil, wait and see what happens. I think that's the best way to start. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the excitement also, especially for children, is don't if it doesn't grow, it doesn't matter. We keep trying, try and try again.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't put so much pressure on yourselves, I don't think, and also, like you say, learn with the kids at the same time. I think that is so important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I was thinking there, going back to that apple seed that the my little boy was talking about the other day when he was chopping up his apple, and I think it's that bit where we can keep going back to it and keep watching it, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. We'll say, well, what could we do differently? There is a learning experience to be had in something that goes wrong as well.
Yeah, exactly. That is also a really important lesson that in life, not everything is a success or every single time, but we have to keep trying at it and try and make and learn from that lesson. I think that sometimes we don't have enough failure for children anymore, which sounds
Mm.
really harsh, doesn't it? But perhaps sometimes we try and make everything so perfect for them that we lose lessons that could be learnt from failure.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Is that I think children need to know and understand that it's okay for things to go wrong, because we can take something from it. It's like, what could we do differently? And it is a part of the process of learning to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right there, Glenn. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is like we were saying as well there about, gardening is all year round, even in the winter months. So we're getting up to spring, and what's the best way to start? What do you think we need to do to start preparing ourselves in the nursery, like as the educators, not necessarily with the children, but as the educators, what do we need to start preparing to get ready for doing gardening with the children?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think the most important thing is what sort of space are you going to be growing in? Are you going to have a raised bed? Are you just going to have a little corner of the garden? You need to think about. I personally always go for raised bed because it just puts a
Mhm.
little bit of protection around those plants from being walked on or trodden on, which happens, and
Or the bikes
that's
riding across
or the
them?
bikes, right? Yeah, of course, yeah. And look, that does happen, and I don't, sometimes that can look at that as a bit of a disaster, but actually, at least they're out there and they're getting amongst it, and I love that. But having a little raised bed, I think, is probably the most important thing. A little space that is a little bit protected, and then think about what you're going to be growing this year. Like I
Mhm.
say, maybe a couple of seed packets, um, or a seed types, and then a few plants as well, and then getting enough seeds for every child to be able to grow. Because I think it's important that everyone gets involved.
Mhm.
Like I say, there will be some failures, there will be some successes, but the best part is you'll have so many plants that you can still show the successes that actually are going to grow.
Mhm.
So it's about getting the seeds, and then at some point, I think it's important to then communicate with parents because you'll be so surprised how sometimes little that does happen, and there's parents with a shed full of seeds just sitting there
Mhm.
ready to be donated. Because the hardest thing, especially if you're trying to buy buy seeds for everyone, is quite expensive, right?
Yeah.
So if you can get seeds donated to you, then perfect. That means it's even easier for you. Um, and I'd start that way as we come into spring. I do think grow your own is important, especially at that time of year as we're getting into spring. And if I'm honest with you, I'd leave the wildlife stuff until a little bit later on in the year when it's a little bit colder, things are not growing as well,
Mhm.
and then you can literally see from about October through to February time, creating those wildlife areas during that time, and then you can continue that sort of circle of gardening throughout the entire year.
I think you just planned out my entire gardening year there. Thank you.
There we go. I'll send you an invoice.
So I'm going to turn around and focus on you for a second now. So one of the things, what's kind of your favorite thing to grow?
My favorite thing to grow is not child friendly, I don't think, but I love growing chilies. Like my favorite thing is to grow chilies. I used to do a long time ago. I used to do like a chili in challenge, and I do a
Hmm.
festival. I do a festival in my city centre, and we have like a chili in challenge thing. Now I'm a little bit older. I can't eat chilies as well as I used to. I used to eat like raw chilies on stage when I used to do my talks as a bit, and now I can't do that anymore. So
No.
it ends in disaster. But I do love chili. I love one of the things I just love them so much. One type that I love the most is a one called Dragon Breath. So you can imagine how hot.
That sounds spicy.
Yeah, it's proper spicy. But that goes back to me. Like I love growing chilies because I use them in the kitchen. I'll get excited about growing them. And if I try and revert that lesson back to children, they've got to be excited about growing that thing to care about it. Because
Hmm.
when I first started gardening, I grew loads and loads of onions, and I hate onions, and I didn't care about them, so they just ended up dying in the ground because I don't like who cares about them? I'm never going to use them. So same thing with children. They've got to care about that plant. They've got to care about what's going to come off the back of it because if they don't, then it is just going to sit there and die and dry up, and
Hmm.
no one's going to care about it. So, but yeah, chilies are my favorite thing to grow.
Okay. That you just reminded me. There was a friend of mine. Her son decided to do that one day. We were sat in her office one day, and her son came in, and she had a chili plant on the windowsill, and he was like, "I'm going to eat that." So he broke it off the like took the chili off the plant and bit into it. And literally his face just, you could see it going from his neck up, it just turned bright red. And the two of us didn't help him because we were too busy laughing. Like
Yeah,
it was like, you muppet, what did you do that for?
it's very brave. Yeah,
Brave or
love it.
stupid, I'm not sure which one.
Oh.
Well, unfortunately, time has caught up with us. But Lee, thank you so much. Like I say, I've got my gardening year planned with the children now, which has been amazing. So thank you so, so much for that.
No, like I say, I appreciate it, and yeah, go and make some good memories with it.
Lee Connelly, thank you very much.